I'm going to say a few words, and with those words, I want your immediate response with either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. A thumbs up means you have a positive connotation of the word, and a thumbs down means you have a negative connotation of the word. The first word is food. Okay, yeah, we all like food, right? Okay, the second word is discrimination. Okay. And the third word is mentors. Okay. I find it interesting that when I said the word mentors, the majority of this audience put a thumbs up. But as you can see, my hand is in the middle. I want to take this time to explain why the typical hand goes thumbs up and why my hand was in the middle. Now, when I was 13 years old, I began to experience my parents' divorce. And due to certain circumstances, I decided as a 7th grader that I was going to stop talking to my father, even though he lived in the same household as us. Now, I was an emotional wreck. However, I didn't want to tell my family that I was depressed because I didn't want to put an extra burden on my mom or my brothers. Later on in 8th grade, my father moved out. And it was right around this time that I was transitioning to high school, and I wanted to ask all these questions about these changes I was going through, but I didn't know who to turn to. So I felt lost. I felt confused. But mainly, I wanted that person to tell me right from wrong as I experienced these new things. Now, the man in this photo started to have a bigger impact on my life. He's the guy I strive to be every day of my life. The way he's respected, the way he carries himself, the way he took me under his wing and gave me guidance and advice. He became that new father figure to me. He became that essential mentor to me growing up. His name is Les, and I honestly cannot tell you how much of an impact he's had on me. Now, our paths were probably different, or maybe your path was very similar to mine. But I am certain that everybody that put a thumbs up had somebody like Les in their life who had this great impact on them. Now, when I was in my 2nd semester of my first year here at college, I was very unhappy sacrificing so many things I loved for the major I was pursuing. So I did what a lot of us would do, and I sought out a mentor on campus. After expressing a lot of that unhappiness I had, I was convinced by my mentor's words about his own story that things were going to be fine. And I thought that was interesting. After just a 30-minute conversation, all that concern I came in with, I threw it out the window and moved on with this new happiness. Now, after about 5 or 6 months, that happiness actually wore off, and I realized that advice I was initially given that I thought had my best interests actually did not. Now, after I realized that happiness wore off, I began to isolate my thoughts from my family and my mentors, because typically in the past what I would do is confuse their advice from my own thoughts. By isolating my thoughts, I could solely focus on what I wanted to do and not what others said I should do. After a few weeks, I made the decision to leave engineering amidst advice to stay. I am now an education major where I'm experiencing true passion, and I have not looked back ever since. We value mentors because we seek advice from them. We assume our mentor's words is what we want, what we need, and what is best for us. We feel as though in many situations, we are too inexperienced to make a decision for ourselves. However, based on my own experience, I hold the statement, "You know yourself better than anyone else," to be extremely true. And that is why I believe we need to stop assuming so much about the words that come from our mentors. Now, because of my experience, I began to look into what influences our responses and our interactions with our mentors, and here's what I found. We live in a society where trusting those in authority is almost an unwritten rule. Let's take the elementary classroom, for example. You have the teacher who's in clear authority of the students, and you have the students who haven't yet learned the material, who trust the teacher to present them with factual information. Now, at some point, everybody in this room was taught about Christopher Columbus. Now, with a raise of hands, who was taught that Christopher Columbus was this great explorer who sailed the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria? Well, I hope that we know that that's not the full story. Christopher Columbus was actually a vicious and brutal man as he encountered the indigenous people of the lands he discovered. But I find it interesting. We didn't question our teachers. I know I didn't. But we trusted them to give us the full story. But in the end, we were given a single perspective of the story of Christopher Columbus. And in general, school children will continue on with their education without asking questions because of this trust they have for their teachers. And it isn't until much later that they learn the truth, or they don't. And this is no different than with me and my mentor. I took my mentor's words for fighting through my unhappiness because it would all work out as it had for him and so many others along the way. Thankfully, I started asking questions before it was too late to change my path. Now, one aspect of our mentor-mentee relationship that we do not often consider is our mentor's past decisions. When you approach your mentor, for example, to leave your major, they're going to respond based on past decisions. Your mentor is more likely to have a positive response if the path you're considering reflects their own. However, they're more likely to have a negative response if the path they're considering conflicts with their own. This concept is known as social similarity. For example, a child's parents force them to play a sport, such as baseball. Now, both parents played sports growing up and felt that they learned a lot about hard work and character from playing. What they don't know is their child actually learns these things a lot better through art, creativity, and expression. Now, your path is different than your parents'. Your path is different than your mentors'. So decisions that they think are best for you may actually be a bad idea. Now, the moment that we create emotional ties with somebody is the point in which we decide that they are important to our lives. These are the people we love, the people who have reached out to help us, or the people who have had a positive impact in our lives. Now, through those emotional ties, we create trust. But trust can be a very dangerous thing. Because when we start blindly trusting these individuals, we have much less of an urge to question what they're actually saying. For example, a student who's applying to college has a college t-shirt on and is walking down the street. A stranger approaches them and says, "Don't apply to that school because it's a bad school." Now that student's either going to brush that off or actually go and do more research to find out if it's a good school or not. But if that same statement came from their mentor, they are more likely to just accept it and move on to look at other schools because of that trust they have for this mentor. By treating your mentor's advice as if it came from a stranger, you have to critically think about what they're actually saying. And lastly, we need to become aware of our fear of the unknown. We are so scared of making the wrong move in an unfamiliar environment that we need to consult others. That's why we go to mentors. And however, I believe that in many cases, you are actually more qualified to give yourself advice. You know your capabilities. You are the only one that truly knows your path and how it has affected you. However, I still believe that it's essential to consider your mentor's words. But I challenge each and every one of you. I challenge you to separate yourself from those emotional ties you have created when listening to their advice. So, as this talk is wrapping up, did any of you notice that I have been mentoring you this whole time? You know, I started off by asking you about your view on a certain idea. I then proceeded to tell you a story about my own path to get you to look at mentoring in the same perspective I hold. But why should you trust my perspective? I could have done just what your school teacher did and given you a single perspective that I hold to be true. That is why I leave it up to you to decide what to do with my advice. Treat me as a stranger, critically think about what I'm saying, and then decide whether or not to apply that advice to your life moving forward. Thank you.